Hear these words from the Gospel according to Mark, chapter 14, verses 12 through 25. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb was sacrificed, the disciples said to Jesus, "Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover meal?" He sent 2 of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the city. A man carrying a water jar will meet you. Follow him. Wherever he enters, say to the owner of the house, 'The teacher asks, where is my guest room, where I can eat the Passover meal with my disciples?' He will show you a large room upstairs already furnished. Prepare for us there." The disciples left, came into the city, found everything just as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover meal. That evening, Jesus arrived with the 12. During the meal, Jesus said, "I assure you that one of you will betray me, someone eating with me." Deeply saddened, they asked him one by one, "It's not me, is it?" Jesus answered, "It's one of the 12, one who is dipping bread with me into this bowl. The human one goes into death just as it is written about him. But how terrible it is for that person who betrays the human one. It would have been better for him to have never been born." While they were eating, Jesus took the bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to them, and said, "Take, this is my body." He took a cup, gave thanks, and gave it to them, and they all drank from it. He said to them, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. I assure you that I won't drink wine again until that day when I drink it in a new way in God's kingdom."
Well, good morning. My name's John Sievering. I'm the associate pastor here at St. Andrew's and All Saints Online, and I am so glad to be able to be with you in worship today. And I want to draw your attention to the vows we have just made as a church. We just promised to be Christ's representatives on earth, and to resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms they present themselves, to continually walk in the way that leads to life. And all of us at some point have made these vows at our baptism, at our confirmation. We have made these vows about how we are Christ's representatives on earth. And I just want you to know that you're all going to fail at that. In case you were wondering, but don't worry, don't feel bad. Those baptismal vows, these are not the only things you will fail at. I'm sure you'll fail at others too. You may not get the grade that you had hoped for on a test. You may make a bad decision at work. You may speak to a friend in a way that you'll regret later. Until you are made perfect in this life or the next, you will continue to fail. So how are we feeling now? Feelings check. Everybody feel terrible? Feeling appropriately Lenty? That's good. That's what I meant for you to happen. I don't know about you, but I had way too much fun at the cabaret last night. So I'm feeling the need to balance that out by feeling terrible about myself this morning. And I'm going to drag you all down with me. No, this is not a healthy way to think about fun or failure or life or happiness at all. The point of this reminder that we will fail is not to shame you, not to make you feel bad about yourself, or even to try to encourage you to fail less. The point is to remind us all that failure is a consistent theme of all human life. Trying hard to reach a goal and not quite getting there. Missing the mark. Falling short. Making a disastrous decision or a terribly wrong turn. We have all fallen short of the glory of God, is the way the Apostle Paul puts it in his letter to the Romans. Now, if we recognize that we all fail, that we all make mistakes, if we all fall short, there are a couple of ways that people tend to take this. Some people say, you're right, no one's perfect, right before they do something that they know full well is awful or even evil. Some would use the reliability of human failure as an excuse for their own bad behavior. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about those of us who are doing our best, who are not as disciplined as we would like to be, who are not as virtuous as we wish we were, who try hard, but who still fall down time and time and time again. And sometimes this failure is in small things. Sometimes this failure is in larger things. And honestly, church doesn't feel like the right place to address it because we don't want to fail, right? We want to succeed. None of us grew up in church singing "Failure in Jesus." So you might be asking, Pastor, why are you trying to depress us? Why don't you give us some good news? Lindsay just read us the good news. We've been going through Holy Week in slow motion, and today is Thursday. Today is the day when we remember the last night before Jesus' crucifixion. We remember Jesus being betrayed. We remember Jesus' prayers to God. And most of all, we remember the last meal that Jesus ate with his disciples before his death. And this Last Supper wasn't just a meal for Jesus, just like many meals are not just a meal for us either. I mean, you know the meals I'm talking about. Maybe it is a last Thanksgiving with a loved one whose health is fading. Maybe it's a reunion with friends that you haven't seen in years. And the moment they get there, it feels like no time has passed at all. Maybe it's a first date with someone you think might be an important part of your future. These tables, these meals are not just the location where these things happen. They are one of the ways that these things happen. The table opens up a certain kind of relationship, makes possible a certain kind of fellowship. The table itself can be a powerful space for love and for transformation. And Jesus knew this. Eating meals together was an essential part of Jesus' ministry. He used the table to invite those who are on the outside of his circle. He used the table to break down social barriers. He used the table to both challenge and inspire his friends and those who considered themselves his enemies. And because we know the rest of this story, because we are grateful for what Jesus did for us, we often forget to look back and notice what this night might have looked like to Jesus' closest friends. Jesus asks his disciples to always remember him, and one conspires to have him killed. Jesus asks his disciples to pray with him. They can't even stay awake long enough to do it. Jesus gets arrested and detained, and his disciples abandon him. Jesus is paraded through the streets, and his closest friends deny that they even know who he is. In our primary source, one of our primary sources for this sermon series, the last week, Marcus Borg and John Dominic Crossan remind us that the theme of failed discipleship continues to be central. More than half of Mark's narration of Thursday evening and night is devoted to it, to the theme of failed discipleship. And this is not the first time that Jesus' disciples had failed. Jesus' closest friends had consistently failed to understand what he was about, to live up to his teaching, and to follow him where he was leading. And yet, what did Jesus do? Jesus invited them to the table anyway. Jesus knew that Peter didn't understand what he was trying to do, and he invited him to the table anyway. Jesus knew that Simon was a hothead, likely to get them all killed, and yet Jesus invited him to the table anyway. Jesus knew that one of his best friends was going to turn on him, betray him to the police and to the religious leaders in a way that would ultimately lead to his death. And what did Jesus do? Jesus invited him to the table anyway. In a time where we are being told who we should hate, who we should fear, who our enemies are, just remember that Jesus invited Judas to the table. Now, I admit I don't particularly want to or feel like preaching this morning. I'll tell you what I want to preach. I want to preach that those heathens over there should be inviting their others to the table. I want to be preaching that they are wrong and I am right, and they need to get on board with what Jesus wants us to do. And yet, Jesus invited even Judas to the table. To be clear, I do believe in setting firm boundaries, and I also believe in non-compliance with evil. We are not called by God to passively allow abuse and deliberate harm. But we are all so quick to sort ourselves into good and bad, righteous and unrighteous, and to exclude those that we see on the other side of the line. And yet, Jesus invited us to his table, and Jesus invited Judas to his table. So I invite you today, instead of finding creative ways to not have to invite people to the table, let's find creative ways to invite people. Instead of sorting ourselves out and deciding who is worthy, let us remember that Jesus invited us. And our job, our responsibility now is to invite others. If our energy goes primarily towards hate and anger and despair, those things will grow in us and in the world. So instead, ask, how are we using our energy to invite those vulnerable people being harmed to our table? And what table do we have to offer them? And if there isn't one, how can we build it? Because Jesus modeled for us inviting our friends and our families and our neighbors, Jesus also modeled for us inviting strangers and refugees and widows and even our enemies. He modeled for us inviting them all to the table of grace. Even though we, like the disciples, fall short, Christ still invites us to his table of love and belonging, and we follow him by doing the same for others. One of my favorite examples of how this has been done is told by Shane Claiborne, the founder of the Simple Way Christian community in Philadelphia. They had been feeding unhoused folks out in a park for a number of months, and a law was passed specifically so that they were no longer allowed to do that. And they thought, what are we going to do if these folks aren't able to get food? And so they said, you know what? We're not going to offer them a meal. Instead, we are going to have communion, and we are going to invite them to our table. Now, they couldn't find any grape juice, and so instead they used Coke. And they couldn't find any bread, so instead they used sandwiches and pizza.
Yep.
And they said, we're not breaking the law. We're not feeding people meals. This is a religious ceremony that you cannot interfere in. And so they invited members of the community. They invited the homeless population in the area. They invited the police officers tasked with upholding the ban, and they invited the legislators who had created the ban. and they invited them all to meet around the table. We don't always get it right. We, like the disciples, often fail. But thank God that Jesus still invites us to his table and insists that we do the same for others. Would you all join me in prayer? Good and gracious God, we thank you for your table of love and belonging. We thank you that we are all invited to it. Every single last person here and not here. God, you want them to be in relationship with you. And we recognize that this table can be a microcosm of your love and grace towards us and towards the whole world, can be a way of us enacting this for those around us. And God, so we ask that we be given grace and courage to set the table for others just as you have set it for us. God, we love you and trust you. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.